We can hire 3 junior engineers for what we pay you. He smirked during my termination meeting. Nothing personal, just budget realignment. My name is Victor Hale. I'm 55 years old and have been the lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing for 18 years. I designed and implemented their entire infrastructure from the ground up, oversaw every expansion, and maintained operations so seamlessly that the higher-ups forgot just how vital I was, until they concluded they could no longer afford me. I sat across from Graham Vickers, the new chief technology officer. He'd only been with the company for 6 months. 42 years old, stylish glasses, Ivy League MBA. He'd been brought in to streamline operations, which, evidently, meant laying off the most experienced personnel first. "The severance package is generous," said Diane from HR, sliding a folder toward me. 2 months' pay and your accrued vacation time. I nodded, accepted the folder, and said, "Thank you." That's it. Nothing more to say. Graham looked almost let down, perhaps expecting a fight, some resistance, a threat of legal action, something to justify the board's decision. "What would you like me to say?" I asked. "Most people in your situation have questions, concerns." I shrugged. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Graham exchanged a glance with Diane, both puzzled by my composure. But they didn't realize I wasn't calm. I was simply finished. "There's a difference. We'd appreciate your assistance with the transition," Graham added. "The new engineering team could use some insight on the architecture. Maybe a short-term consulting role." "I'll consider it," I replied, already knowing I wouldn't. We shook hands. I packed up my desk without making a fuss. 18 years of work condensed into a single cardboard box. I gave a few colleagues a silent nod goodbye. Most looked away, anxious they might be next. In the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan, the database administrator I'd hired over a decade ago. "This is bad, Vic. The whole team's panicking." I didn't reply. Back home, I sat on the deck, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the sun dip into Lake Ontario. The water glowed copper in the fading light. My wife, Elaine, placed a hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. I shrugged. Something come up. What Graham didn't know, what he didn't care to learn, was that I hadn't just supervised the systems. I personally wrote a significant portion of the custom code, with minimal documentation, because the company never invested in a documentation team. I alone understood the deep redundancies, the layered security features, the web of dependencies that kept everything stable. And I had no intention of explaining it now. I joined Veltria Housing back when it was still Bayview Properties, a small firm with 4 buildings and barely a dozen employees. Their IT setup back then? 2 desktops, a fax machine, and dial-up internet. Harold Bay hired me from a consulting gig in Syracuse. "We're expanding," he told me. "Need someone to build something strong." Over the next 18 years, I transformed that crude system into a fully integrated platform that handled everything: tenant screenings, maintenance requests, automated rent collection, spanning 63 properties across 4 states. I built it methodically, piece by piece, constantly upgrading and adapting as we grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the company to a private equity firm. They renamed it Veltria Housing. Initially, they kept me around, impressed with what I developed. But the culture shifted, new leadership, new priorities. Quarterly performance became more important than sustainable infrastructure. The red flags appeared slowly. They rejected my proposal for a documentation team. "Too expensive," they said. "Maybe next quarter." That quarter never arrived. Then came the influx of consultants, fresh MBA grads babbling about disruption and cloud integration. They'd sit through my architectural briefings with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions incompatible with our systems. I pushed back. I showed them the intricacies of our custom code, explained why their cookie-cutter solutions wouldn't work. Eventually, I stopped getting invited to strategy meetings. Elaine saw it before I did. "They're easing you out," she said one evening over dinner. "You need to be ready." I brushed it off. They need me. No one else understands how everything connects. "That could be exactly the issue," she replied. 6 months ago, Graham was hired as the CTO. His background was in banking software. He came in talking about modernization and retiring legacy systems. He brought on 3 junior engineers straight out of college and had them shadow me. I answered their questions, but they couldn't grasp the depth of the system. How could they? It had taken me years to build and understand. Last week, Graham stopped by my office. "Quick meeting tomorrow," he said casually. "Just a quarterly check-in." I should have seen it coming. 2 weeks after I was let go, my phone rang while I was in my home office updating my resume. It was Graham. I let it go to voicemail. "Victor, it's Graham. We're experiencing issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble with some of your code structure. Could you give us a quick call back for a short consultation?" I deleted the message and returned to polishing my resume. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding more frantic. By evening, Alan texted me. "Systems have been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing it." The next morning, Diane from HR called. "Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite substantial." I picked up my phone. "How substantial?" $300 per hour, minimum 4-hour engagement. "I'll think about it and get back to you," I replied, then hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the lake. Elaine placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "What's on your mind?" she asked. "I'm thinking they're finding out exactly what I'm worth." Over the next 3 days, the calls kept coming. Graham, Diane, even Justin Bayview, who was still on the board, reached out. The tenant portal was down, the maintenance scheduling system was malfunctioning, and automatic payment processing had failed, causing issues for thousands of residents. But I didn't respond to any of them. On the 4th day, I received an email from Devlin Systems, a regional competitor to Veltria. They managed fewer properties, but had been expanding quickly. The email came from their director of technology, Lawrence Devlin himself. "Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're looking to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure." I replied and set up a meeting for the following day. That evening, as Elaine and I were preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. Graham Vickers stood on my porch, his designer glasses slightly askew, his usually pristine suit crumpled. "Victor, I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have an emergency. The entire system is down. Nothing's working. The team can't figure out what's wrong or how to fix it." I leaned against the doorframe. "That sounds serious." "It is. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you a generous consulting fee. $500 per hour, whatever it takes." I thought about the cardboard box in my garage. 18 years of work reduced to a few keepsakes. I thought about the "nothing personal, just cost-cutting" line. I thought about the documentation team they had never approved. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles," I said quietly. "But I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up." I closed the door on his stunned face and went back to making dinner. For the first time since my termination, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just clarity. I wasn't going to fix what they had broken. The interview with Lawrence Devlin went better than expected. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, away from both companies' offices. "I've followed your work for years," Lawrence said, stirring his coffee. "The integrated property management system you built at Veltria is legendary in our industry. No one else has anything close to it." "Thank you," I said. "It took time. That's why I want to talk about time. We're looking to build something similar, but we don't want to start from scratch. We need someone who understands the architecture, the integration points, the security layers. Someone who can build us something better than what's out there." "I'm interested," I replied. Lawrence smiled. "Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of chief systems architect. Full benefits, stock options, and a salary 20% higher than what you were making at Veltria." It was a good offer. Too good, almost. "Why me?" I asked. "There are younger engineers out there, cheaper ones." Lawrence laughed. "You sound like your former employer. We tried that route. Hired 3 bright young engineers from top schools. They build us something sleek and modern that crashes every time we get more than 100 simultaneous users. We don't need cheap. We need reliable." I accepted the offer the next day. Meanwhile, Veltria's issues were worsening. Alan kept me updated through occasional texts. The system had been partially restored, but critical functions were still failing. They had brought in an expensive consulting firm specializing in legacy system recovery. A week after I started at Devlin, Graham called again. "Victor, please. This is getting serious. We've lost access to payment records for the last 3 months. Tenants are complaining about incorrect charges. The consulting team says they need your input on the database structure." I was tempted to ignore it, but something made me pick up. "Graham, I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. I'm afraid I can't help you. We'll double whatever they're paying you for just 2 days of your time." "It's not about the money." "Then what is it about? Revenge? Are you enjoying watching us struggle?" I paused, carefully considering my answer. "No, Graham, I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that really means. The board wants to discuss bringing you back. Full salary, plus a signing bonus." For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it quickly faded. Going back would change nothing. The same executives who had deemed me expendable would just be waiting for the next chance to cut costs. I appreciate the offer, but I made a commitment to Devlin Systems. Graham's voice hardened. "You know there could be legal implications if we discover you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property concerns." There it was, the threat I had expected. "The system is exactly as it was when the company repeatedly rejected my request for a documentation team." I replied evenly. "Every line of code belongs to Veltria, as stated in my employment contract. I've taken nothing with me except my experience. But feel free to have your lawyers contact mine." I hung up, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. The accusation that I had sabotaged them was the final insult. At Devlin, I was starting fresh, building systems properly with full documentation, training programs for the engineering team, and redundancies that would prevent the kind of catastrophe Veltria was experiencing. I wasn't going to look back, but I wasn't going to help them either. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. A month after joining Devlin Systems, I received an unexpected visitor in my new office. Alan, my former database administrator, stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding a laptop bag. "Got time for lunch?" he asked. "Over sandwiches at a nearby deli?" Alan filled me in on the chaos at Veltria. "It's worse than you think," he said, lowering his voice despite the noisy lunchtime crowd. "They've lost access to historical data going back 3 years. The backup systems are corrupted somehow. The consulting firm is saying they might need to rebuild from scratch." I wasn't surprised. The backup system had multiple redundancies and security protocols that had to be followed precisely. Skip one step, and the entire process would fail, designed to protect tenant data from unauthorized access. "That's not all," Alan continued. "I found something when I was trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing system. Graham had been planning your termination for months. He'd been meeting with the board, convincing them that your custom infrastructure was too costly to maintain." "How do you know this?" Alan pulled out his laptop and showed me a series of emails he discovered in the system archives. Emails between Graham and the board discussing the legacy staff reduction plan, specifically naming me as the first target. He told them they could replace you with cheaper engineers and transition to off-the-shelf solutions within 6 months. Alan said he projected cost savings of over $1 million annually. I read through the emails, feeling a strange detachment. One line from Graham stood out. "Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity." "There's more," Alan said. "The private equity firm that owns Veltria is planning to sell. They've been preparing for this for over a year. Graham was brought in specifically to cut costs and make the company look more profitable before the sale." Now it all made sense. The push for standardization, the resistance to proper documentation, the sudden focus on reducing senior staff costs. It wasn't about improving the company. It was about dressing it up for a quick sale. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Alan closed his laptop. "Because I quit yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has left. The consultants are estimating at least 6 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer. He hesitated, and because Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is considering jumping ship. They've lost faith in the management system. I thought about the implications. Westbrook represented nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them would be devastating, especially with a sale pending. What will you do now? I asked. Alan grinned. Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators. Later that afternoon, I spoke with Lawrence about bringing Alan on board. He agreed immediately. We were building a team, brick by brick, with people who understood what it meant to create systems that lasted. That evening, I received another call from Graham. This time, his voice lacked its usual authority. Victor, please. The situation is critical. Westbrook is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my decisions. We need your help. I'm sorry, Graham. I can't help you. Name your price. Anything. It's not about price. It's about respect for experience, for the work that goes into building something right the first time. The line was silent for a moment. You knew this would happen, he said finally. You knew exactly what would break and when. No, Graham, I replied. I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. Information I tried to share many times. I ended the call, feeling neither triumph nor regret, just the quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 2 months into my role at Devlin Systems, Lawrence called me into his office. I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook, he said, referring to the CEO of Westbrook Properties. They're officially terminating their contract with Veltria next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio. Westbrook Properties managed over 10,000 units across the Northeast. It would more than double Devlin's current operations. We're not ready for that kind of scale, I admitted. The new system is coming along, but it's only halfway there. Lawrence leaned forward. What would it take to get ready if we had to? I thought about it. 3 more senior engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and at least 8 weeks of development time. Even then, it would be tight. Jeffrey's desperate, Lawrence continued. Veltria's failures are affecting their reputation with tenants. He's willing to give us 12 weeks and fund the infrastructure expansion. This was the moment, the turning point. If Devlin took on Westbrook and succeeded, it would establish us as a serious competitor in the industry. If we failed, it could sink both companies. Let me think about the architecture, I said. I'll drop a plan by tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I sketched system diagrams, mapped data migration pathways, and considered scaling challenges. By morning, I had a plan, ambitious but achievable. A hybrid approach that would allow us to onboard Westbrook's properties in stages, minimizing disruption. When I presented it to Lawrence, he studied it carefully. This is solid, he said finally. But I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase that adds 3 weeks to the timeline. It's non-negotiable, I replied. That's where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one. We train the team on every component. No single points of failure. Lawrence nodded. I'll take your word for it. Let's move ahead. The following weeks were intense. We hired 5 more engineers, including 2 who had recently left Veltria. Alan built a database migration tool that could translate Veltria's data structure into our new system. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Westbrook's needs. Halfway through the project, I received an email from Justin Bu, the former owner's son, who still sat on Veltria's board. Victor, I want to apologize for how things ended. The board was misled about the consequences of letting you go. Graham has been removed as CTO. We're struggling to recover, and Westbrook's departure will hit us hard. If you're ever interested in coming back, the door is open. I didn't respond. 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, we were ready for a staged rollout. Westbrook's smallest region, comprising 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If successful, the remaining regions would follow. The day before the migration, Lawrence called me into his office again. A familiar face was waiting, Jeffrey Westbrook himself. So, you the system architect? Jeffrey said, standing to shake my hand. Lawrence has told me a lot about you. All good, I hope. Jeffrey smiled. He says you've built us something that won't break down every time we add a new property, something that will grow with us. That's the plan. I also hear you used to work for Veltria. I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. They're in trouble, you know. The private equity firm is trying to sell, but with Westbrook leaving and their systems still not fully functional, they're not finding many interested buyers. He paused. Except one. Who's that? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Devlin Systems, Lawrence said. We're considering making an offer at a substantial discount to what they were valued at 6 months ago. I looked between them, processing the implications. If that happens, Jeffrey continued, we want someone who understands both companies to lead the integration. Someone who could salvage what's valuable from Veltria's infrastructure while transitioning everything to your new architecture. Are you asking if I'd be willing to work on that? I clarified. Lawrence nodded. Only if the acquisition goes through, and only if you're comfortable with it. I thought about the irony. The system I'd built, the people I'd trained, the company that had discarded me, all potentially coming back under my direction. I'd be willing, I said finally, but I have one condition. We do it right. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts. Agreed, Lawrence said. We've learned that lesson. As I walked back to my office, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge, just the simple satisfaction of knowing that good work, done right, eventually speaks for itself. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The sign now read Devlin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through for less than a quarter of what the company had been valued at before my departure. Lawrence and I walked through the office, greeting former Veltria employees who would be staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly, others smiled with relief. A few, those who had worked closely with me over the years, nodded with quiet understanding. Graham was gone, along with most of the executive team that had approved my termination. Justin Bayou had stayed on as a consultant, helping ease the transition with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the hardware I'd specified, the blinking lights of systems I'd designed. Want to go in? Lawrence asked. No need, I replied. We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway. In the main conference room, the remaining Veltria staff had gathered for the announcement. Lawrence introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer, who would be overseeing the technical transition. Many of you already know Victor, he said. He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be guiding us through the integration of both companies' technologies into something better than either had before. As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no desire to say, I told you so. What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, and the support that would be available to everyone during the process. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning smoothly. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. The leaves along Lake Ontario had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, a fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter. The board approved your proposal, Lawrence said as soon as I sat down. The Technical Education Division will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors. This had been my condition for staying after the integration was complete. Not a higher title or more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of systems engineers and architects, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build things meant to last. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. No, thank you, Lawrence replied. What you've built here is remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it, the documentation, the knowledge sharing, the emphasis on quality over quick fixes. Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty exit from Veltria, this was a planned transition to my new role. As I packed my things, Justin Bayou knocked on the door. Got a minute? He asked. We walked to the small courtyard outside the building. My father asked about you, he said. He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking. How was Harold? I asked. Good. Fishing a lot. Justin paused. He always said letting you go will be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right. I nodded, unsure what to say. I learned something from all this, Justin continued. Value isn't always visible until it's gone. As I drove home along the lakeshore, I thought about the value of experience, of care taken, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last, and the people who build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Sometimes, the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves.